Oh, hi, Nathan. This is Michael Wan, politics reporter for Korea Daily. Nathan, can you introduce yourself, and can you also state why you decided to run for the California State Attorney General seat?
Certainly. So my name is Nathan Hochman. I'm running for the California Attorney General position. And the reason I'm running is the number one issue I'm concerned about is safety and security. Mm-hmm. If you can imagine, 2014 was considered one of our safest years in California history in the last 50. But over the last years, because of weakened laws and even worse prosecutors, our safety and security has gone off the cliff. And by that, I mean that there's a spiral of violence that now exists, and a spiral of lawlessness, that now exists that we haven't seen in years. And what does that look like? That's where one person walks into a small business, steals just under $950, and walks, not runs out, because they know they're not going to be prosecuted. That leads to 3 people running out of a CVS, 80 people running out of a Nordstrom's, 100 people in a flash mob in a 7-Eleven, and then you've got smash and grab robberies, follow home robberies, train robberies, and a double-digit rise in homicides. My goal is to stop this spiral of lawlessness and turn it around and create a spiral of lawfulness. And the way I will actually do it is 3 ways. Partner with the police rather than just make them our enemy. Go ahead and actually fund police departments if we want a better trained, hired, and supervised police department. And ensure that all crimes have proportionate consequences so that we don't turn a blind eye to certain criminals or certain crimes that are wreaking havoc in our society.
You know, this whole movement started ever since the George Floyd murder that happened a couple years ago. And after that, this whole BLM movement started. The far left came out, Antifa was going crazy. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, this defund the police movement got traction. And I just don't understand how just one bad apple that we had with Derek Chauvin, one bad apple can paint the entire police and the law enforcement as like they're all the same. They're all in the same team. How can this become such a divisive issue? Why wasn't there some pushback against this movement from the get-go?
Well, I think what happened is that you had some very loud, strong, but a small section of advocates that took the George Floyd issue and basically condemned our entire systemic operation and said that all police were acting like the police officer in the George Floyd case, and that we now need to do a massive correction of the entire police departments. Well, it turns out they were wrong. There are officers that do cross the line, and when they do, when I was a federal prosecutor for 7 years, for instance, I actually prosecuted police officers that crossed the line. So when they do cross the line, they too need to be prosecuted. But the response isn't to defund the police. That's a crazy response, especially if we want you, since crime is exploding, if we want the police to be better at their job, you actually need to fund it. If we want to attract, brighter and more capable people, we got to pay them more. If we want to make sure that they're trained by the time they get a badge and a gun, guess what? That training is expensive. And then if we want to make sure there's adequate supervision, that too is expensive. So the answer to go ahead and defund the police rather than smartly fund the police and make sure that funding is going into creating better police departments, I opt for the latter view of funding the police rather than defunding them.
Do you hear from people, the constituents in California, do you hear them that we need more law enforcement, we can't stand this defund the police, or is it the other way around? Do you think this defund the police movement has gone even bigger? Because if you look at the primaries in the city of LA, these defund the police candidates have been winning. They were like number one in the LA City Attorney race. You have Faisal Gill, who pretty much wants to investigate the LAPD, and also you have Eunice Hernandez in CD1. She's also, I think, she pledged that one of her first bill in the Los Angeles City Council will be about defunding the police. And she won the seat, and it shocked many people, including me. So do you think this movement is getting bigger, or do you see a more of a blowback against them when you talk with the constituents, when you're campaigning around?
So what's interesting is that when I talk to people about safety and security, and this is not just Republicans, but Democrats and independents as well, what I'm hearing is that people are fed up, they are frustrated, and they're afraid. They're afraid to send their children out at night, their neighbors, their parents. They're frustrated with what's going on in their society with homelessness and how their societies seem to appear much more like third world countries than sort of the golden state we live in. And where I take comfort in a countervailing trend, you're right that certain politicians did get at least a certain number of votes in the primary. They're leading perhaps in the primary. But what you also are seeing in San Francisco, for instance, the most progressive city just recalled their most progressive prosecutor by 55 to 45. And of that 55%, 7/8 of it were Democrats and independents who voted to throw out a prosecutor who was not placing their safety and security as the foremost situation. And you know, here in Los Angeles, even if the recall does not go forward against George Gascon, what has happened is that George Gascon has set 3 records, if you can imagine that. The first record is there's over 520,000 valid signed petitions, which is 520,000 more than any DA in LA history had ever received. The second is that there are 37 cities in Los Angeles County that voted to support the recall. Before this, there were 0 cities against LADA. And the last record that he set is that of the 800 LA deputy district attorneys, those are the people who work for George Gascon, they took a vote. And 97.8% of them voted to support the recall. So I think while you're correct to point out that there are certain forces in society that look like we're heading toward defunding the police, there's also equal forces in society that are fed up with what's going on and want to actually fund the police departments rather than defund them.
Can a Republican win in a statewide race? I mean, it's been, I think the last time we won, the Republican won was it 2006, right? Wasn't it Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? That was the last race I think the Republican Party won. And you and also there was another state controller, right? State controller, I forgot his name.
Yes, Lanhee Chen.
Lanhee Chen, exactly. So some people consider California being crazy left wing. Went to it's an ultra progressive state. We have illegal immigrants coming over here. I think seems like the state wants it. Seems like Joe Biden, I think he wants it too. Wanted to know your opinion about that. Do you think you can win? Yeah.
I absolutely think I can win. I think this is the most winnable race for the first time in a generation for a Republican. Because I'm running as a moderate Republican. I want to make that clear. As a moderate Republican, I vow to enforce all the laws on the books of the state of California, whether those are for women's reproductive rights, gun control rights. I publicly said I didn't vote for anyone for president in 2016 or 2020. I kept that position blank on the ballot. So I'm someone who's about as moderate, socially moderate, but fiscally conservative and very strong on safety and security. When I say I have 30 years of law enforcement experience. I was a federal prosecutor for 7 years. Went after narcotics traffickers and gang members. I was a U.S. Assistant Attorney General, appointed by President George W. Bush, unanimously confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Went after tax cheats across the United States. I've also worked as a defense attorney. So I know where the difference is between people who are true public safety threats and those who can serve their debt to society like a nonviolent first-time offender by home detention or community service. In contrast to my over 30 years of criminal justice experience, our current Attorney General, Rob Bonta, if you can believe this, has 0 years of criminal justice experience before he took office. In fact, he has as much, I joke around on the campaign trail, that he has as much criminal justice experience before he took office as my Labradoodle Lou, which is 0. And that's shocking that Governor Newsom would appoint someone with absolutely 0 law enforcement experience to be our chief law enforcement officer, which is in large part why I've gotten the support of over 15 district attorneys up and down the state of California, as well as sheriffs and police chiefs. And I will actually, and that's why when you ask, can this be won? When safety and security are a top three issue, as they are, I believe that the voters of California will look beyond the party affiliation to the person actually holding that office. And Rob Bonta believes that George Gascon is doing a great job.
That's ridiculous.
Let me say that again. Rob Bonta, our current Attorney General, thinks that George Gascon is doing a great job with the most pro-criminal agenda in California history. That needs to stop.
Yeah.
And you bring in someone like myself to do it.
And you know, Rob Bonta, I think Gavin Newsom was bragging about that. He's the first Asian American Attorney General. You know, the Democrat plays a race card a lot. You do know that, right? And
certainly, but Rob Bonta will always be. He's actually not the first Asian Attorney General. That was Kamala Harris.
Actually, yeah. To be honest, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, he's Filipino Attorney General to hold that
Eastern
position.
Asian, right? East Asian. That's. I mean, they claim that he's the first. So actually, it's factually incorrect because it was Kamala Harris, right?
Correct.
Yep.
But he's the Filipino American to hold the position. And by the way, he will always be the first Filipino American to hold the position. That absolutely does not mean that we should get 4 more years of what we're experiencing today. And that's my proposition to voters. Do you feel more safe and secure today than you have in the past 2, 4, 6, or 8 years? If you do and you want 4 more years of what you're seeing out there, vote for Rob Bonta. If, on the other hand, you are fed up, frustrated, and afraid of what's going on out there, and you do not want 4 more years, but you want someone with 30 years of experience to handle what's going on, who believes in a very pragmatic situation, that's Nathan Hochman for Attorney General.
So what are the biggest problem about Rob Bonta? I think most people don't even know who he is. You know, they don't have the concept. I mean, Gavin Newsom is famous, but you know, when you ask Rob Bonta in the middle of, you know, on the street, they wouldn't know. But I mean, what do you think is his biggest issues?
So Rob Bonta's biggest issues, the first one I mentioned, is that he's completely unqualified for the job. I mean, there are plenty of Democratic DAs, Democratic former prosecutors that Gavin Newsom could have chosen, but he chose an Oakland politician instead of someone in law enforcement to be our chief law enforcement officer. Again, that's in contrast to the 30 years of criminal justice experience that I have. But the second thing, and this is even the most important thing, is that he, again, thinks that George Gascon is doing a great job here in Los Angeles. He believes, as George Gascon does, that we should have no cash bail, basically have people arrested in the morning and they're back on the street by the afternoon. He thinks that violent and serious offenders should not be prosecuted to the full extent of the law on the front end, and then should be let out before they've served their complete sentences on the back end. I couldn't disagree more. He thinks that George Gascon's doing a great job by not trying any juveniles as adults, even if they've committed, mass murder. He thinks that's a great idea. He wants to reverse every death penalty and life without the possibility of parole sentence because he just thinks those sentences are too harsh, no matter the heinous crimes, the multiple murders, even the child abuse murders that have been committed by these criminals. That's not apparently a bad enough thing for Rob Bonta. In other words, he's enacted the most pro-criminal agenda in our entire 170-year history. So again, I stand with the police. I stand with sensible law enforcement. I stand with funding police departments, and I stand with ensuring that all crimes have proportionate consequences. And by the way, that doesn't mean going back to the situation where everybody gets put in jail for 100 years. I believe in what's called the hard middle. And it's hard because it requires you to look at each individual defendant, their crime, and the impact on the victim, and then make the correct call. And only someone with 30 years of experience like myself is in a position to do so.
What does Rob Bonta think about Chesa Boudin? Was he sad that he got recalled?
Absolutely. Rob Bonta and Chesa Boudin are basically, my term for them are the let them go guys. And my tagline is, if they don't want to do their job, we need to let them go and bring in someone who will. Well, the people of San Francisco let Chesa Boudin go and recalled him. We almost had that situation in Los Angeles with George Gascon. And on November 8th, the voters can let Rob Bonta go and replace him with someone who will do the job, namely myself, Nathan Hochman.
Is Rob Bonta funded by George Soros, like how George Gascon is, or Cesar Boudin is?
Rob Bonta has been completely funded by the far left, and that would eventually include one of George Soros's organizations. He will receive millions of dollars to keep this pro-criminal agenda alive and well for the entire state of California. And God help us all. We have to deal with this for the next 4 years.
Yeah. What is your thought about Gavin Newsom? How has he been as a governor? And also, I wanted to know, your endorsement list. Did you get endorsed by the California Republican Party and the National Republican Party? I was wondering about that. Those two questions.
Yeah, so on the endorsements, I've received the endorsement of the California Republican Party. I've received the endorsements of the LA Sheriff's Department, the Association of LA Deputy Sheriffs. I've received the endorsement of every Republican congressperson from Joe Issa, Michelle Steele, Young Kim, who've endorsed in this race. The same thing with Republican state legislatures. I've received all their endorsements. I have the endorsement of Sheriff Villanueva. I'm the only Republican that the Democrat Sheriff Villanueva has endorsed, as well as a whole bunch of over 13 district attorneys now across the state of California. I've received the endorsement of, for instance, Sheriff Don Barnes in Orange County. So we've received the endorsements of law enforcement, which is shocking because you would think that they would endorse the incumbent, the guy they work with, Rob Bonta, but they are so fed up with Rob Bonta that they want they want basically someone who understands prosecutions, someone like myself with the experience to make these tough calls. And they know that Rob Bonta lacks completely that experience. I would say that's sort of, and then with respect to Gavin Newsom, I can work with anybody who wants to prioritize the voters' safety and security, whether it's Gavin Newsom, the state legislature, or anyone. On the other hand, if they choose not to prioritize people's safety and security, they will hear from me loud and often, which is not a voice we have in Sacramento right now. And absolutely having that independent voice to keep the Democrats in check, as opposed to just a monopoly of Democratic power, is one of the most compelling reasons why we need a moderate Republican like myself in Sacramento.
Yeah, are you friends with Michelle Steele and Young Kim? You have good rapport with them?
I am friends with both Michelle Steele and Young Kim. They've been terrific supporters of mine, as I am of theirs.
Okay, and I wanted to know your rapport with the Korean American community. Do you have some relationship with them? Have you been to Korea? We wonder.
So I have been to Seoul, Korea. It was a number of years ago. It was a wonderful experience. I worked with the Korean community as a prosecutor. I ended up prosecuting cases involving back, if you remember, with the earthquake, the riots, the fires, and the floods in the 90s. It involved the Korean community. Many businesses were getting destroyed or ripped off. And we came in and brought cases against the criminals who did that to Korean grocers, Korean small businesses. And I've also worked and defended in my sort of defense capacity. I've defended a number of Korean Americans. I work in both the tax field and in white collar defense, and I've asserted people's constitutional rights when the government has gone too far. So yeah, I've had a wonderful working relationship with the Korean community. And I've always enjoyed their support and hope to have that support in this race.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about this one bill that was very controversial. Many people talked about it, even in the Korean American community. I think there was one bill a couple of years ago that it passed that if you're a 14-year-old minor, but if you had consent sexual relationship with a 24-year-old, that you don't have to be listed as a sex criminal or Megan's list. Do you know about this bill, right? Do you know, or you don't?
I don't know about that particular law.
Okay.
I mean, I know that there are certain statutes that deal with two minors. If two minors are 17 years old and they were able to get certain consent, you have laws like that. The one you've referred to, though, I'm
you
not
don't know
familiar.
about that. Okay, got it. Thank you very much. Nathan, so can you say any last words to our readers and viewers, and also can you also state your campaign website, how we could contact you, any phone number, email? You can advertise yourself.
Thank you very much. So again, my name is Nathan Hochman, Hochman, and I'm running for California Attorney General as a moderate Republican. I have 30 years of experience against my opponent's 0 years of experience. My website is www.nathanhochmanmyname.com, NathanHochman.com. And what I want people to focus on is that this is an incredibly powerful and important race. The California Attorney General is the number 2 most powerful person in the state of California, and responsible for your safety and security. So if you are concerned, fed up, frustrated with your safety and security, you need to vote in this race. And you need to not vote necessarily for the political party, but the person. And you need to vote for someone who's qualified, who has that 30 years of experience, and actually will bring back and restore safety and security, and have his focus on victims first, not the most pro-criminal agenda that his opponent, Rob Bonta, has. So again, I'm hoping that everyone listening to this will vote on November 8th. When it comes time to voting for Attorney General, they will fill in the little bubble for myself, Nathan Hochman, for California Attorney General.
Did Eric Early also endorse you? You know, he did.
Yes.
Make it. He did.
So my two of my opponents, Anne Marie Schubert, who ran as an independent, she's the Sacramento district attorney, and Eric Early, who also ran as a Republican, they've each endorsed me in this race.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your fundraising front. Are you doing well on that?
So yes, so fundraising, every person can give up to $8,100. We have, you can raise up to $9.78 million. We raised, for instance, over $2.2 million in the primary. 40% of that money comes from Democrats and independents. Because again, my message is not a Republican message, it's a California message. And so people will also donate to the campaign. It's the way to get that message out to the most number of people. And you can go to my website at nathanhochman.com and donate at that link.
You said up to $8,100, right?
Up to $8,100, that's correct.
And when you send out these mailers or social media networking, do you translate it to Korean so that people can understand? You know, I mean, we're going to write an article about this interview and, you know, pretty much explain what I just talked about with you. But I was wondering whether your team are doing those Korean version of that mailing.
So we intend to advertise in the Korean community in Korean, so that it'll help us get our message to the most number of people possible.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Nathan, for this.
One more thing, Michael. Yeah. On Nathan's website, there's Korean page there, so we do have the Korean option on Nathan's website, and I believe we're working on the Korean podcast. Or if you have any idea, any suggestions, you can tell us. Okay. But for your viewer and for your readers, they can go to Nathan Hochman's website, and there's Korean version there.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.